Poor mechanic's son fixed a female CEO's car in the rain. What happened next changed their lives forever. The rain fell in a soft, steady whisper over the quiet outskirts of the city. It was the kind of drizzle that made everything glisten, but kept most people indoors. A narrow two-lane road stretched between tall oak trees, puddles forming along the cracked asphalt. A small figure pedaled slowly through the mist, rainlets clinging to the sleeves of his worn-out t-shirt. Lucas, just 6 years old, was heading home from school on his rusted bicycle, his backpack bouncing slightly with each push of the pedal. His shoes were soaked, and his thin jacket did little against the damp. As he rounded a curve, he noticed something unusual. A white Mercedes-Benz was parked awkwardly along the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking faintly in the fog. From the hood, a thin stream of smoke curled upward, vanishing into the gray sky. The car looked expensive, clean, sleek, a rare sight in this part of town. Standing beside it was a woman, tall, poised, and stunningly out of place. She wore an immaculate white suit, tailored to perfection, her blonde hair pinned back in a neat twist. Her heels clicked on the wet pavement as she moved around the car, clearly agitated. She held her phone up high, frowning. No signal. Claire Dalton, founder and CEO of the high-end fashion brand Dalton Femme, had built an empire around empowering women through elegance. Her designs walked the runways of Paris and New York. She was used to control, precision, and always having a solution. But not today. She cursed under her breath as another attempt to call for roadside assistance failed. The dashboard was lit up like a Christmas tree. And of course, this stretch of road was practically deserted. Except it was not. The quiet squeak of old bike brakes made her turn. A small boy, no more than 6 or 7, rolled to a stop near her front bumper. He looked soaked through, his light brown hair plastered to his forehead. His backpack sagged, and the chain on his bike looked just as old as the sneakers on his feet. He blinked up at her, water dripping from his lashes. "Do you need help, ma'am?" he asked. Claire stared. She had not expected anyone, let alone a child, to show up. For a split second, her instinct was to wave him off. But something about his voice, quiet, sincere, made her pause. She glanced around. No other cars, no people, no signal. The engine was still smoking. "Yes," she said finally. "I think something's wrong with my car." Lucas nodded, propped his bike against a tree, and walked straight toward the front of the vehicle. Claire blinked, hesitating. Was he serious? Without saying another word, Lucas reached up and popped the hood latch. It took him a bit of effort. His hands were small, but he managed. The heavy hood lifted with a creak. Smoke and heat rose into his face, but he did not flinch. Claire stood frozen in place, torn between alarm and fascination. Lucas wiped his palms on his pants, then leaned in. His fingers moved confidently over a few loose wires and damp hoses. He pressed a connector back into place, wiped off a sensor, and tapped gently on a rusted metal casing. Claire opened her mouth to speak, but said nothing. Her phone was still useless. The boy stepped back, glanced at her. "Try it now," he said, still skeptical. Claire slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. Her eyes widened. Lucas grinned as the hood lowered back into place. She stepped out, stunned. How did you know what to do?" He shrugged. "My dad fixes cars. He lets me watch. Sometimes he lets me help." Claire looked down at the small, rain-soaked boy standing in front of her luxury car, his shoes squashing in a puddle. She had walked boardrooms full of billionaires without blinking. But in this quiet moment, she was at a loss for words. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $200 bill. The folded cash still warm from her leather wallet. She stepped toward the boy as the rain began to ease into a soft drizzle. "Here," she said, holding the money out. "That was impressive, and I think you just saved me a very expensive tow truck bill." Lucas looked up at her, then at the money in her hand. His eyes, a soft shade of green, blinked once, then twice. He shook his head gently. "No, thank you, ma'am." Claire frowned slightly, unsure if he had misunderstood. "It's okay. I want you to have it." Lucas took a step back, stuffing his little hands into his damp jean pockets. "My dad always says, you don't take money for helping people stuck in the rain." The words landed on her like something heavy but warm. In a world of contracts, transactions, and bottom lines, she had not heard anyone say something like that in years, especially not from a child. Claire let out a quiet breath. Something shifted in her chest. "Well," she said after a moment, lowering the money. "Your dad must be a very good man." Lucas nodded proudly. "He is." She looked at the small boy, his oversized backpack, his worn-out bike now leaning against the guardrail. It was past lunchtime. His cheeks were flushed from the cold. "I can't let you go without at least thanking you properly," she said. "Would you let me buy you lunch?" Lucas tilted his head, eyes lighting up. "Can I bring my dad?" he asked quickly. "He hasn't had fried chicken in weeks." Claire blinked, a smile slowly forming on her lips. "Of course." A few minutes later, the three of them sat inside a tiny fried chicken joint just a block away. It was one of those old places with red leather booths and the smell of hot oil clinging to the air like perfume. The rain tapped against the windows while steam rose from the food. Lucas chattered excitedly between bites of drumstick and mashed potatoes. He dipped his fries into ranch dressing with wild enthusiasm, making a small mess on the table. Claire could not help but laugh. Then her eyes shifted to the man sitting quietly across from her. Tom. He had arrived on foot, his shirt damp from the rain, dark hair, slightly unkempt. His eyes were tired, but kind. There was a quiet dignity about him, something grounded. He was not polished like the men Claire usually dealt with, not rehearsed, but there was no trace of bitterness either, just stillness. Tom reached for a napkin, wiped his son's hands without saying a word, then turned to Claire. "Thank you for the meal," he said simply. She nodded. "Thank you for raising such a good boy." Tom gave a half smile. "He's better than I deserve." Lucas looked up from his plate. "Dad works really hard. He's the best fixer ever." Claire sipped her soda, her gaze lingering on Tom. His work clothes were frayed at the cuffs. There was oil under his nails, but he had the hands of someone who fixed things with care. His wedding ring finger was bare. "Do you work nearby?" she asked. "I run a small garage down by Maple Street," he said. "Just me and a few tools. Been at it for years." She hesitated, then asked gently. "And his mother?" Tom's eyes lowered for a moment, passed away when Lucas was 2. Silence stretched between them like glass. Claire looked at the boy beside her, bright, joyful, whole, and then back at the man who had clearly done the work of 2 people for years. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded. "We do okay." Lucas leaned against his father's arm, humming as he munched on his last piece of chicken. Claire sat back in her seat, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. She had entered the restaurant as a grateful stranger. But as she watched the man and his son share a quiet look, she realized something unexpected. She was the one being shown a world she had almost forgotten existed. After the meal, Claire had intended to say a polite thank you and leave. It was, after all, just a coincidence, a flat tire, a kind boy, a simple gesture of gratitude. But something about the way Tom spoke, slow, honest, almost shy, made her linger. They stood outside the small restaurant, the rain now reduced to a gentle mist. Lucas had run ahead to fetch his bike, leaving Claire and Tom under the narrow awning. He was not a talkative man. He did not brag or embellish his stories. But when he spoke about his son, his face changed. The quiet tiredness in his eyes softened into something warmer. "Lucas once made a toy car out of an old milk can," Tom said with a chuckle. "Even taped bottle caps to it for wheels. Rolled like a rock, but he loved it. Said it was a mechanical masterpiece." Claire laughed. It was the kind of story no business partner would ever tell. She found herself asking more about his work, his garage. Tom rubbed the back of his neck modestly. "I learned from my dad. Grew up in a garage pretty much. Used to be in a bigger place out in the city, but after my wife passed, I moved out here." Quieter, better for Lucas. That sentence settled between them like dust in warm light. Claire had met men who spoke in numbers and metrics, men who memorized stock reports like scriptures, but none of them had ever said a single sentence with so much weight and without asking for anything in return. She glanced at her phone. 2 missed calls from an investor she was supposed to meet that evening. She slipped it back into her purse, unheard. "I should probably let you go," she said softly. Tom just nodded. "You know where we are if your car ever acts up again." The next day, Claire found herself rerouting her schedule. She told her assistant she needed to check out a logistics facility and drove back toward the edge of town. The garage sat at the corner of a quiet street, peeling paint on the sign, tools hanging from pegboards inside. Lucas greeted her with a grin that still had syrup on his cheek. Claire wandered in, chatting briefly with the boy before stepping out back to take a call. As she stood in the small concrete yard behind the garage, her voice lowered, something caught her eye. She turned and froze. Tom was crouched beside an old wheelchair. The metal frame rusted in places. An elderly man sat nearby on a bench, thin and frail. Claire recognized him vaguely from the neighborhood. Tom worked carefully on the brake lever, fingers moving with precision. The old man tried to slip a folded bill into Tom's hand. Tom shook his head gently. "You need it more than I do, Mr. Jenkins. Let me just tighten the brake for you." Claire stood still, heart caught in her throat. A few minutes later, after the man had gone, a small, scruffy gray cat padded quietly into the garage, its ribs showed beneath its fur, its eyes weary. Tom knelt again, opened a can of tuna from a crate nearby, and set it down. The cat crept forward, sniffed, and began to eat. Tom did not rush it. He sat beside it in silence, fingers gently stroking the matted fur, whispering something only the cat could hear. Claire watched from behind the glass door. Her breath fogged the pain. He did not see her. He was not performing. He was simply kind, covered in oil, hands rough, sleeves rolled, hair tousled, but his touch was softer than silk. Lucas's voice snapped her out of the trance. "Come see my secret corner." He pulled her by the hand to a dusty corner of the garage where he had arranged old tires, soda caps, scrap wires, and bent spoons into something resembling a robot fortress. Claire knelt beside him, laughing freely as he explained every detail with the excitement only a child could possess. She did not know when her heart had stopped, feeling so heavy. As the afternoon faded, Claire stood near her car, watching the scene before her. Tom was cleaning his hands with a rag, head down, thoughtful. Lucas was sitting cross-legged, drawing cars with sidewalk chalk. Something about it, the simplicity, the sincerity, pressed into her chest like a quiet truth. She got into her car, closed the door, and pulled out her phone. Her finger hovered over a name in her contacts. The investor waiting at a downtown rooftop bar. She locked the screen. Then she placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the engine. Back in the city, life resumed its familiar rhythm. Emails, meetings, decisions, appearances. Claire Dalton returned to her world of tailored suits and high-rise offices of models and marketing campaigns and investors demanding progress reports. She sat through boardroom discussions, filmed interviews, and late-night design sessions without skipping a beat. But every night when the city went quiet and she finally kicked off her heels, her thoughts drifted to a small boy with syrup on his cheek. To a man whose silence spoke volumes, to a garage that smelled like oil and rain, but somehow felt warmer than her penthouse. She told herself it was just a passing thought, a strange kind of curiosity. But when her Mercedes died in the middle of the company's parking lot one gray afternoon, she did not hesitate. Her fingers moved before her mind caught up. Tom, she called him without thinking. The number now saved in her contacts. Without a name, just Lucas's dad. He arrived 30 minutes later in the same dented pickup truck, wearing the same grease-stained shirt. He did not ask what had happened or why she had called. He simply gave a small nod. "Pop the hood, I'll take a look." Claire stepped aside, oddly relieved by the simplicity of his presence. No small talk, no need for pretenses, just a man doing what he knew best. When the car finally rumbled back to life, she looked at him, standing there with his sleeves rolled up, wiping his hands on an old cloth, and found herself hesitating. "You have time for coffee?" she asked, motioning toward a quiet garage cafe across the lot. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Coffee," she nodded, suddenly uncertain. "It's not fancy, just where I go when I need to breathe." He considered it, then nodded once. "Sure." The cafe was warm and softly lit with a view of passing cars and distant cranes. They sat by the window, steam rising from their cups. It was the first time Claire really spoke about the fashion house she built from the ground up. About the best friend who sold out her designs to a competitor, about the crisis that nearly destroyed the company and her. About the way people praised her strength, but none stayed to see the cost. She did not cry. Claire Dalton did not cry, but her voice cracked once. Tom said nothing for a long time. He sipped his coffee slowly, eyes steady. Then he said, "Sounds like you've been strong for too long." Just that, nothing more. And it was exactly what she needed to hear. She looked out the window. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It felt real. When they got up to leave, the sky had begun to darken again. As they stepped outside, Claire's heel caught on a slick patch of stone near the edge of the sidewalk. She gasped, slipping slightly, and in one smooth motion, Tom caught her. His hands gripped her arms, one sliding gently around her waist. The world seemed to pause for just a moment. She looked up, startled, only to find his face, closer than expected, calm, unsure. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Then Claire stepped back, flustered. Sorry. Tom rubbed the back of his neck. No, I should have watched the step. They both laughed too quickly. A moment too long, a heartbeat out of rhythm. She brushed off her jacket and straightened her posture. He stepped aside, hands in his pockets again, the moment fading, but not forgotten. When they reached her car, Claire did not know what to say. Thank you, she managed. Tom just nodded. Anytime. He turned, walked back to his truck. No big words, no awkward goodbyes, just left. Claire stood beside her car, watching as the tail lights of his old truck disappeared into traffic. She told herself to get in, to move on, to shake off whatever that had just been, but she did not. Not right away. She stayed there, fingers still tingling from where he had touched her, wondering why she felt like she wanted to stay, even if it meant sitting on an old tire in a dusty garage with no glamour, no spotlight, just truth. Claire Dalton had never been a woman to repeat herself, at least not outside of rehearsed speeches or design meetings. But somehow she kept finding reasons to drive past that quiet garage on the edge of town. Sometimes it was under the pretense of needing her brakes checked. Other times she claimed she had questions about her car's battery life. But more and more she stopped by without a reason at all. Lucas welcomed her every time with a huge grin and the same nickname. Hey, it's the chicken lady. The name stuck after their fried chicken dinner weeks earlier, and he never let her forget it. Claire pretended to be annoyed, but she secretly adored it. Tom at first remained reserved, still polite, still distant, but the lines around his eyes softened when she came. He started offering her a cup of coffee before she even asked. He began telling her about the small victories of fatherhood, the lost teeth, the science projects, the scraped knees. Claire told him about her childhood in a quiet suburb, how she once wanted to be a painter before fashion took over her life. She confessed that sometimes success felt like a cage built out of golden expectations. They never called it a friendship. They never labeled what was growing quietly between them, but it was there in the way she stayed longer each time. In the way his shoulders relaxed when he saw her walk in the way Lucas insisted she help him paint his cardboard robots. One evening, Claire arrived at the garage just as the sun dipped behind the trees. The light was golden low. Tom looked up from under a hood and said, "Lucas is in bed." Not feeling too great. Claire's smile faltered. "Is he okay?" "Fever," Tom said quietly. "Been up and down since last night." Without hesitation, she sat down her purse. "Let me help." Tom opened his mouth to object, but stopped. He nodded silently, grateful. That night, Claire sat beside Lucas's bed, placing cool cloths on his forehead. She read from his favorite picture book while Tom paced the hallway, checking on them every few minutes. When Lucas whimpered, Claire held his hand and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." Hours passed. The fever slowly broke. Lucas's breathing steadied. Just before dawn, as Claire leaned in to adjust his blanket, the little boy opened his eyes. "Miss Claire, I'm here, sweetheart." He reached out, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers. "I want you to be here forever." Her breath caught, tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She squeezed his hand. "I'll stay as long as you need me," she whispered. From the doorway, Tom stood in the shadows, watching the woman in designer heels holding his son's hand like he was her entire world. The next morning, the sun rose into a different kind of day. Claire helped make breakfast. She poured juice, cut toast, and laughed when Lucas refused cereal because it was not the fun kind. Tom watched her from across the kitchen. A part of him wanted this scene to last forever, but another part, older, more afraid, told him it was not his to keep. He wiped his hands and said gently, "Claire, I'm not sure I fit into your world." Claire looked up, still holding a butter knife. "Maybe my world needs to change." He looked down. "I don't want you to give up things for us." She stepped closer. "Tom, not everything I gave up was worth keeping." Their eyes met. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to reach out, but he did not. So, she did. Claire closed the distance, brushing her hand against his. "I'm not walking away," she said simply. And he believed her. The photo was grainy, probably taken from a distance with a long lens, but it spread like wildfire. Claire Dalton. The Claire Dalton. Stepping out of a dusty garage in flats and jeans, laughing beside a mystery man with oil-stained hands and a tired smile. The headline read, "From penthouse to parking lot. Is Claire Dalton trading power for a mechanic?" The internet ran with it. Whispers turned into meetings. Meetings turned into pressure. The board of directors at Dalton Femme convened within days. In a polished conference room high above the city, Claire sat at the head of the table while faces once friendly now wore tight professional concern. "Claire," one of the executives began, "this relationship, whatever it is, has become a distraction." "Not to me," Claire said flatly. Another board member chimed in. "We've built this brand on empowerment, elegance, and exclusivity. This could send the wrong message." Claire leaned forward, her hands calmly folded. "You mean it sends a human message? Investors are nervous," someone added. "In fact, one of our largest stakeholders is threatening to pull out if this isn't handled." Claire blinked. "Handled? You need to distance yourself from him, Claire." Publicly, she felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Later that evening, back at the garage, Tom sensed something was wrong the moment she stepped out of her car. She did not smile. She did not speak. He wiped his hands on a rag and waited. Claire finally whispered, "They want me to end this as," he said nothing. "They think you make me look less." Tom's jaw tensed. He nodded slowly. "Of course, I don't care what they think," she added quickly. He held up a hand. "It's okay, Claire." "No, it's not." Tom looked away out toward the street. The golden light from the sunset made the garage look warmer than usual, quieter somehow. Then he turned back to her and smiled. That same soft, tired smile. "You deserve someone who fits your world," he said gently. She shook her head. "Don't say that," but he was already stepping back, already fading. He did not fight. He did not beg. He just nodded and walked into the garage, leaving her standing by the car, more alone than she had felt in years. 2 days later, the board met again, this time with lawyers, analysts, and media advisors. Claire walked in wearing a black pantsuit and no makeup. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun. She looked tired but calm. An advisor began, "We've drafted a statement. You'll express regret. Distance yourself from the mechanic. Reaffirm your commitment to the brand." Claire raised her hand. The room fell silent. She stood. "I won't be reading any statement," she said. "And I won't be distancing myself from anyone." One of the board members sighed. "Claire, be reasonable." She cut him off. "If my company cannot support the people I care about, then I don't want to lead it." Gasps. Murmurs. Papers shuffled. Eyes widened. Someone stammered, "Are you saying I'm resigning?" Claire said, effective immediately. "You built this company." "Yes," she nodded, "but I didn't build it just to be loved by strangers. I built it to stand for something real. And if real love is not welcome here, then neither am I." With that, she placed her access badge on the table and walked out. No press release, no interview, no apologies, just her choosing herself, and the ones who made her feel more like a person and less like a brand. Claire Dalton was no longer the CEO of Dalton Fim. Her face had vanished from billboards and business magazines. The media's frenzy had died down, replaced by newer scandals and shinier headlines. But for the first time in years, Claire felt like she could breathe. She slept without checking her calendar 3 times before bed. She drank coffee for taste, not survival. She stopped wearing high heels unless she felt like it. And more importantly, she started giving back. She called it the Lucas Initiative, a scholarship program focused on providing STEM education for underprivileged kids, named, of course, after the boy who had once fixed her car in the rain with nothing but kindness and dirty fingers. Claire funded the first round herself. She gave talks at schools. She partnered with community centers. She stopped trying to impress people who never cared, and started listening to those who did. And when a vacant lot went up for sale just a few blocks from Tom's garage, Claire bought it. No press, no ribbon cutting, just concrete plans and quiet progress. A few months later, a small vocational training center stood where the overgrown weeds used to be. Teens from the neighborhood came to learn about engines, wiring, tools, and trade skills. It was not glamorous, but it was real, and it was hers. One sunny afternoon, Claire was reviewing blueprints outside the center when she heard a familiar, excited voice. "Miss Claire, look, Dad is fixing my bike again." Lucas came barreling across the lot, helmet askew, smile wide. Claire turned to follow his little finger and her breath caught. There, crouched beside a rusty red bicycle, was Tom. Same oil-stained jeans, same calm hands. He looked up slowly. meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. Neither of them spoke, not at first. Claire walked forward, her heart thudding in her chest. Lucas had already run off to show someone his painted robot. The sun hung directly above them, casting soft shadows over the gravel. Tom stood, and then, without a word, he stepped toward her. His hand found hers, his other reached up to brush a strand of hair from her cheek, and he kissed her. No speeches, no grand gestures, just sunlight and silence, and the kind of love that had waited patiently to be claimed. Claire closed her eyes, not because she was unsure, but because she had never felt so certain. 1 year later, the garage no longer smelled like rust and regret. It had been transformed. Walls freshly painted, new tools lined neatly on shelves. A proper sign out front. Lucas Technical Center. Learn, build, grow. Teenagers filed in every day, some curious, some skeptical, but all of them left knowing how to use their hands for something more than scrolling or fighting. Some left with purpose. Tom was the instructor. Claire was the heart behind it. She handled donations, grants, logistics, quietly, effectively, but she was never too far from the grease and the noise. Their house sat just down the road, a small, cozy place with chipped white shutters and wildflowers growing in a stubborn little patch out front. It was not fancy, but it was home. Lucas, now in first grade, had become something of a neighborhood favorite. He always had a story, a question, or a made-up game to share. He told everyone that his mom used to be a queen of fashion, but now she builds robot schools and makes the best pancakes. He still called Claire Chicken Lady sometimes just to make her roll her eyes. Claire had not worn a designer suit in months. These days, she preferred jeans, soft sweaters, and bare feet on hardwood floors. But she smiled more now, and she laughed without checking her phone. That afternoon, the sky was gentle blue and the breeze smelled like rain that had changed its mind. Lucas was out front rolling a toy car down the porch steps, making dramatic engine noises and staging imaginary races. Claire sat under the porch awning, a book resting on her lap, though she had not turned a page in a while. She was watching Tom. He was across the yard finishing up a bike repair for one of the local kids. His sleeves were rolled up, sweated his brow, but he moved with ease, focused and calm. When he looked up, Claire smiled. Tom grabbed a rag, and walked toward her, wiping his hands. Claire closed her book, tilted her head, and said with a soft laugh, "All I wanted that day was someone to fix my car." Tom chuckled, eyes warm, "And I just wanted to help a stranger." At that moment, Lucas came bounding up the steps. Out of breath, his face shining with joy, he threw his arms around both of them in a messy, eager hug and declared, "Now we're a team." Claire and Tom looked at each other over Lucas's head and nodded. Yes, they were not a perfect family, not a fairy tale, but a family built on kindness, trust, and the kind of love that did not need grand gestures to feel real. A mechanic, a former CEO, and a little boy who believed in people more than most adults ever did. And that made all the difference. Thank you for watching this heartwarming story. If it moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, please take a moment to support our channel. Click subscribe and tap hype to never miss another soul-stirring story. At Soul Stirring Stories, we believe simple acts can change lives and love can be found in the most unexpected places. Leave a comment, share with someone who needs this today, and stay with us for more stories that speak to the heart. See you in the next one.